I was standing in my kitchen when my sister, Lila, finally answered the phone. Her voice was bright, careless, almost musical. The kind of tone you hear from someone lounging by the pool, not from a woman who'd just stolen $70,000. I remember gripping the counter's edge as she spoke. "Oh, that money," she said, as though I'd asked her about a misplaced sweater. "Don't get dramatic, Helen. We used it for the honeymoon. We'll pay you back eventually." Eventually. My heart thudded so loudly I barely heard her next excuse. A breeze on her end carried the sound of waves, laughter, clinking glasses. Somewhere very expensive. Somewhere my life savings were funding. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't ask how she could do this to me, her older sister, the one who had protected her since childhood. I simply whispered, "You used my savings?" And she answered with a smug little hum that told me the truth long before she shaped the words. "You're better off without all that stress anyway. Money sitting is money wasted." It wasn't wasted. It was my late husband's settlement. It was the foundation of the small cottage I'd planned to buy, the one with the wraparound porch and the walnut tree in the yard. It was supposed to be my quiet place to grow old, away from chaos. Instead, it was swirling down the drain of an overwater bungalow in Tahiti. I hung up the phone without saying another word. The silence afterward was so total it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Dust motes drifted lazily through a sunbeam, innocent and oblivious. Outside, a dog barked. A car rolled past. The world continued. But something in me shifted. Not broken. Not shattered. Just rearranged. And in the middle of that quiet shift, a truth settled into my bones with the certainty of a stone sinking into still water. Lila didn't think I would do anything about it. She expected tears, maybe a few days of icy silence, and then forgiveness, the same cycle she'd relied on for decades. She expected me to be predictable, pliable, forever patient. She had no idea the woman she was dealing with now. There is a moment in every betrayal where grief pauses just long enough for clarity to slip in. I felt it then. Cold. Clean. Sharp. This wasn't just about money. It was about being dismissed. Patronized. Used. I slid my phone across the counter and opened the small drawer where I kept my husband's old fountain pen, a relic of a life lived with someone who believed in responsibility, integrity, and honor. Lila had taken something from me, but she had also given me something far more powerful. A reason to fight. As I capped the pen and laid it beside a fresh notepad, I realized something else. Revenge didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to be dramatic. It just had to be true. And I had 70,000 reasons to make sure the truth came out. I picked up the pen and wrote the first name on the page. The one person Lila never expected me to call. My name is Helen Ward, and I'm 62 years old. At this stage of life, most people assume you're fragile, slow, perhaps a bit scattered. But I have spent decades teaching high school English, and let me tell you, wrangling adolescents is the best training for spotting lies, reading subtle shifts in tone, and documenting everything. I retired 3 years ago after my husband, Samuel, passed from a sudden cardiac event. His death eased me into a quieter version of myself, one that made peace with solitude. I learned to cherish small rituals, making tea at dawn, tending the rose bushes he planted, marking passages in books he once underlined. Even so, grief left me cautious. I pulled back from social gatherings. I kept my financial decisions conservative and practical. Samuel had left me a modest life insurance settlement, enough to give me security, but not enough to be careless with. The $70,000 I saved over the years was meant for my next chapter. Not extravagance. Just a home where I could age with dignity and a patch of land to plant vegetables. Something manageable. Something mine. And so when my sister Lila, a whirlwind personality 10 years younger than me, suggested I let her hold the money temporarily while I finalized a property transaction, I believed her. She insisted it was safer in her account because she worked with a financial advisor who could keep an eye on it. She said scammers were targeting older women. She used soft tones, concerned expressions, and just enough truth to make it sound reasonable. I trusted her because she was family. I trusted her because she had always been the baby sister I had practically raised after our mother died. And I trusted her because, at that age, you don't expect betrayal to come from someone whose first school forms you signed, whose first heartbreak you soothed, whose college tuition you quietly helped cover. But age brings something that youth doesn't always appreciate: patience, perspective, and a long memory. When I learned what she had done with my savings, the first wave of emotion was disappointment. A deep, weary disappointment, not only in her but in myself for ignoring decades of smaller warnings. Lila had always been impulsive, financially reckless, and prone to dramatics. She had borrowed money before, small sums, always paid back just late enough to make me uneasy. But $70,000 was not a small sum. It was not a mistake. It was a choice. And choices have consequences. As I sat at my dining table, pen in hand, I felt Samuel's presence the way I sometimes do, a gentle steadiness in my chest, a reminder of who I am and what I'm capable of. I am not vindictive. I am not cruel. But I do believe in accountability. My sister had taken advantage of my trust. She had gambled with my future. And she expected me to swallow the injustice quietly. She didn't know that grief had changed me. It had taught me to walk through fire without flinching. I wrote the name carefully, pressing just enough to make the ink glide smooth and dark. Attorney Michael Gaines. A man who never wasted words. A man Samuel once trusted. The next morning, I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, and the moment I told him why I was calling, he said the one thing I least expected. "Tell me everything," Michael said, calm, direct, already scribbling notes. As I walked him through the story, memories unspooled like film reels. Family gatherings. Shared holidays. The unbalanced closeness between Lila and me that had always tilted toward caretaking on my end. Growing up, our parents worked long hours. I became the built-in babysitter, tutor, and emotional buffer. When Lila cried, I soothed her. When she demanded attention, I shaped my life around it. I was 14 when she was born, practically a second mother. That imbalance didn't disappear as we became adults. It evolved. She used my shoulder to cry on during every breakup. Borrowed dresses. Borrowed cars. Borrowed money. Promised the moon. Delivered very little. Still, I loved her fiercely. Family makes allowances that the outside world never would. Michael listened quietly. Then he asked, "Has she done anything like this before?" "Not on this scale," I told him. But yes, there were patterns. Manipulation disguised as need. Responsibility dodged with charm. She was the type who apologized beautifully while never intending to change. My relationship with our brother Daniel offered a sharp contrast. He was steady, grounded, and suspicious of Lila's motives. He'd warned me more than once to set firmer boundaries. We didn't speak daily, but when we did, the conversations were warm, uncomplicated, and practical. Still, I had defended her. She's our sister. She's trying. She means well. But intentions don't protect savings accounts. Michael exhaled slowly. "Helen, this isn't just moral wrongdoing. If what you've told me is accurate, she's committed fraud. Potentially embezzlement. This is serious." Hearing those words from someone objective, a man with no emotional history in the matter, felt like a lens snapping into focus. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was the victim of a crime. Family or not, theft was theft. That night, I called Daniel. When he answered, his voice was groggy. He worked early shifts delivering medical supplies. "I'm sorry to wake you," I said, "but I need to tell you something." As I recounted what happened, silence stretched between us. Heavy. Controlled. When I finished, he spoke with a precision I had rarely heard from him. "She used you, Helen. And she thinks she can walk away from this without consequences." 4 years, He had kept his distance from her unpredictable choices. But now something shifted in him too. "I'll help you," he said. "Whatever you need." The ache in my chest loosened, just a hair. I wasn't alone. Still, beneath that small comfort was a deeper sorrow. Family fractures cut the deepest, and once they open, they rarely close cleanly. I spent the rest of the evening in my living room, staring at the framed photo of the three of us as children. Lila, gap-toothed and grinning, Daniel with messy hair, me holding their shoulders, the responsible one even then. I tried to understand how we had gotten here, how love could coexist so closely with betrayal. But some questions have no answers. The next morning, Lila sent me a text that changed everything, and revealed she had no intention of making this right. The text arrived at 7:14 a.m. "Lila, we really don't need to drag this out. The money is gone. It's not coming back. Accept it and move on. Love you. Love you." The audacity of that last line nearly made me smile, not from amusement, but from disbelief so pure it felt surreal. The money is gone. Not coming back. Accept it. As if $70,000 evaporated like spilled water. As if my sacrifice, planning, and restraint were inconveniences to her new married life. I stared at the message, letting the weight of each word settle. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't remorse. This was dismissal. Final. Condescending. She had no intention of repaying me. Not a cent. I forwarded the screenshot to Michael and Daniel. Both replied almost instantly. Michael with a request for a full record of all past communications. Daniel with a single sentence. "She's digging her own grave." The betrayal wasn't her spending the money. It was the contempt that followed. The belief that I would swallow the loss because she decided it was final. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from a quiet, rising determination. I began assembling everything. Bank transfers. Email threads. The messages leading up to the day she convinced me to let her hold the funds until my home purchase cleared. Her promises. Her reassurances. Her flattery. The more I compiled, the clearer the truth became. She hadn't stolen impulsively. She had groomed me for it. Step by subtle step. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely arrives as one sudden blow. More often, it's a series of tiny cuts, so light you hardly notice them, until the final one strikes deep enough to bleed. My trust had been weaponized. That afternoon, I drove to the small plot of land I once hoped to buy. The cottage never materialized, but the field was still open, stretching under a soft sky. A few birds circled overhead, dipping low as though inspecting me. It was a quiet place. A good place. It reminded me that my dreams were not dead, only delayed. I took a long breath, letting the cool air settle my thoughts. Lila believed she had taken my future. But she didn't understand something fundamental. I am not a woman who crumbles. She miscalculated the one thing people often misjudge about older women: our resilience, our experience, our ability to wait, to observe, to act with precision instead of impulse. Stealing my money was one thing. Underestimating me was another. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Michael called with an edge of urgency in his voice. "Helen, I need to meet with you tomorrow. In person. There's an angle here that could change the entire situation, but you need to be prepared." Prepared for what? He didn't say. Only that the truth was deeper than even I realized. When I walked into his office the next morning, he slid a document across the table that made my stomach drop. The document was a printout of a wire transfer. My wire transfer, but with a line I had never seen before. A beneficiary note. A secondary routing instruction. "Your sister didn't just move the funds to her personal account," Michael explained, tapping the page with his pen. "She funneled it through her husband's business first. That's what makes this more than just a family argument. It's financial misconduct." Her husband, Mark, owned a small contracting firm, barely solvent, mostly propped up by loans and tax extensions. I had known this in vague terms, Lila always framed it as entrepreneurial growing pains. But now I had proof she used my savings to temporarily stabilize his business before withdrawing the lump sum for their honeymoon. My heart pounded with a mixture of indignation and clarity. "This was planned," I whispered. "Meticulously," Michael confirmed. "And her text this morning constitutes an admission." The investigation expanded quickly. Michael guided me step by step, ensuring everything we gathered was factual, documented, and legally admissible. He emphasized staying calm, consistent, and silent toward Lila. No accusations. No emotional reactions. We built the case with patience and precision. In the days that followed, I learned to navigate folders and spreadsheets with the same discipline I once taught Shakespeare. There was something empowering about it, seeing my life transformed into a timeline of evidence. Facts that could not be talked away. Truth that stood on its own legs. Meanwhile, Daniel helped gather information about Mark's business history. He had contacts across the county through his delivery routes. Quiet, discreet conversations revealed troubling patterns. Unpaid subcontractors, questionable accounting practices, sudden deposits that vanished weeks later. It wasn't just messy bookkeeping. It bordered on fraud. My money had been swallowed by a sinking ship under the guise of sisterly protection. And now I knew. Each discovery was a small cut of its own, but instead of weakening me, it strengthened my resolve. This wasn't vengeance born of rage. It was justice born of clarity. One evening, after hours of reviewing documents, I paused to stretch my back and caught sight of Samuel's photo on the mantel. His warm eyes seemed to meet mine. "I'm doing this right," I told him softly. I wasn't seeking to destroy anyone. I was seeking to restore balance. The next morning, Michael called with another development. "We need to file a formal demand letter," he said. "But before we do, you should know, once we send it, your sister cannot ignore this anymore. It will escalate quickly." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. So be it. But in the midst of preparing the letter, something unexpected happened. A voicemail from Lila. Her voice trembling. Her words frantic. "Helen, we need to talk. Not about the money. About something else. Please. Call me back." When I returned the call, her husband answered instead, and what he said revealed just how tangled their situation had become. Mark's voice was tight, clipped, and unmistakably strained. "Don't call this number again," he said before I could speak. "Whatever you think you're doing, stop now. You're going to ruin everything." I felt a stillness settle over me. "I'm only asking to speak with my sister." "You're not speaking to anyone," he snapped. "And if you file anything, we'll make sure you regret it." The line went dead. Threatening me was his first mistake. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Michael, and sat quietly at my dining table. For the first time since this began, I felt something unfamiliar bloom inside me. Not fear, not grief, but resolve in its purest form. This was the turning point. This was the moment I chose to stop mourning what was taken and start protecting what remained. Within hours, the demand letter was finalized. Thorough, professional, irrefutable. It outlined the unlawful transfer of funds, the misuse of assets, and the formal requirement for repayment. It also included the voicemail, appended in transcript form. We sent it via certified mail, and email for immediate notice. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. Lila stood on my porch, ashen-faced, trembling. Not the carefree woman from Tahiti. Not the manipulative charmer who could bend a room with her smile. She looked older, smaller, terrified. "Helen," she said, voice breaking, "please don't do this. You don't understand. Mark said it would be temporary. He said the business needed a boost. He told me to get the money from you because you wouldn't ask questions." I let her speak. I didn't comfort her. I didn't soften. "You didn't have to give him the money," I said quietly. She flinched. "Yes, I did. I thought," he told me, "if the business failed, our marriage would fall apart. I was trying to save my life. And you sacrificed mine? Tears slid down her cheeks. I thought we'd pay you back before you noticed. But then, things spiraled. There it was. The truth wrapped in excuses, softened by tears that once would have swayed me. But not anymore. Lila, I said gently, I'm not here to destroy you. But I will protect myself. She reached for my arm. Helen, please. Don't involve lawyers. Mark says they could audit us. He says. I stepped back. Your husband's problems are not mine. The look on her face broke something in me. Not sympathy, not compassion, but the last remaining thread of the illusion that our relationship was built on mutual respect. As she left, defeated, I sensed something subtle shift in the air. A tide turning. The next morning, Michael called again. Their lawyer responded. Mark is in deeper trouble than I realized. This might resolve faster than expected. Later that afternoon, law enforcement arrived. But not at my door. The squad car parked quietly in front of Lila and Mark's house. No sirens. No spectacle. Just the slow, deliberate movement of officers with purpose. From my car down the street, I watched as Mark emerged onto the porch, face flushed with fury and disbelief. He gestured wildly as officers spoke to him, shaking his head, pacing, clutching at his hair. Then came the moment he went still, the moment they showed him the paperwork. His posture collapsed. The officers escorted him to the car. He didn't resist. Rage had drained into something hollow. Lila stumbled after them, pleading, crying, reaching out as if she could physically pull the situation back under control. But consequences don't bend for tears. His arrest wasn't for my case directly. It was for tax fraud and business misrepresentation, issues uncovered during the investigation triggered by my demand letter. My situation was simply the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire fabric of his financial misconduct. As for my $70,000, the path to repayment became bureaucratically complex, but feasible. Mark's assets were frozen. His business accounts examined. A restitution plan began forming before he even reached processing. I sat in my car, hands folded in my lap, breathing steadily. There was no triumph in watching someone's life crumble. No gloating. Just quiet acknowledgement. Actions have consequences. Even for those who believe they're untouchable. Lila didn't look up as the patrol car pulled away. She stood alone on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, hair sticking to her tear-stained cheeks. For the first time, she looked not manipulative, not defiant, but lost. That night, she texted me again. A different tone now. Hollow. Resigned. Lila, I don't know how to apologize. I don't know how we ended up here. I didn't reply. Some words need silence to settle. Over the next month, the legal process unfolded at its own pace. I stayed steady, cooperative, calm. My role was simply to provide facts, truth, documentation. Through controlled channels, I learned that my money had indeed been accounted for and would be returned. Slowly, through structured restitution, but returned nonetheless. It would not be stolen from my future forever. Meanwhile, Lila moved in temporarily with a friend. Her world was smaller, quieter. She didn't contact me again. Daniel checked on me often. We shared simple dinners, sometimes sitting on the porch in comfortable silence. Family fractures may scar, but some bonds hold through the worst storms. One evening, he said, "You didn't ruin anything. You exposed what was already broken." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the sky fade into evening and felt a strange peace settle over me. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Weeks later, Lila asked to see me one last time, and her request surprised me. We met in a quiet cafe near the river, neutral ground. She arrived early, hands clasped, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Her wedding ring hung loosely on her finger. I wondered if she noticed. "I'm getting divorced," she said before I sat down. I nodded. I had expected it. He blamed me, she whispered. Said everything was my fault. Said I ruined him. I didn't answer. Her self-reflection was hers to navigate. For a long moment, we simply sat in the low hum of the cafe. Her coffee cooled untouched. Are you happy now? She asked, not accusatory, but fragile. No, I said truthfully. This never made me happy. She looked up, startled. I didn't want your life to fall apart, I continued. I wanted my life not to be stolen. Tears welled again, but I didn't reach across the table. Boundaries can be acts of love too. Love for oneself. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said gently. You rebuild. I rebuild. Separately, for now. She nodded, absorbing the words. A quiet acceptance settled between us. Before she left, she placed an envelope on the table. I started paying you back, she said. It's not much. But it's something. Inside was a cashier's check, small compared to the full amount, but significant given her circumstances. A gesture, imperfect but sincere. I tucked it into my purse without comment. We parted without hugs, without promises, just two women acknowledging the fractured truth between them. In the weeks that followed, life softened again. I returned to my morning tea ritual. My rose garden bloomed late that year, vibrant and fragrant. The restitution checks came monthly, slow but steady. I visited the land I still dreamed of building on. The walnut tree's shadow stretched longer across the grass. I stood beneath it and closed my eyes, feeling a gentle breeze carry away the last remnants of bitterness. Healing doesn't come with fanfare. It comes in small, quiet steps. And I was walking them. On the day the final restitution payment arrived, I found myself writing one last message to the viewers of this story. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, let me leave you with something worthwhile. Something earned through heartbreak, patience, and truth. Trust is not a gift. It is a responsibility. For years, I believed love meant giving without question, forgiving without reflection, carrying more than my share because that's what good family members do. But love without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-erasure. When someone betrays your trust, whether family, friend, or partner, you are not obligated to protect their comfort at the expense of your own integrity. Accountability is not cruelty. Documentation is not mistrust. Justice is not revenge. Revenge, true revenge, is simply the restoration of what was taken, through truth, clarity, and courage. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't sink to their tactics. I stood quietly in the truth. And the truth did the work. To anyone listening who has ever been dismissed, manipulated, or underestimated because of your age, your gender, your softness, or your loyalty, hear me. Your strength is not in how loudly you fight. Your strength is in how steadily you stand. And sometimes, standing tall is the most powerful retaliation there is. As for my future, I did buy that small cottage. It took longer than I planned, and the land needed more work than expected. But the porch is sturdy, the walnut tree gives ample shade, and the air holds a peace that feels earned. Lila and I speak occasionally. Brief, polite conversations. Healing, but not forgetting. Some relationships are not meant to return to what they once were. They are meant to evolve into something quieter, clearer, and healthier. And that is enough. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Protect your peace. Document your truth. And never underestimate the quiet power of a woman who has finally decided she is worth protecting. The world changes when we stop apologizing for expecting respect. Thank you for listening.